dark crawl space, very little light, very little air movement in there, especially if there's not any powered vent fans or anything like that. And the moisture sources vary also. We'll get into that in just a second. And the food source, of course, is the structural lumber that the crawl space is built out of, the house is built out of. And that gives it everything it needs to just go to town and start working on dissolving the wood, essentially, with the enzymes that they use to dissolve it. They'll come into the crawl space through spores. They're fungus. They're just like mushrooms. They spread through spore. So any open airway that they could possibly get in there, it's just a tiny microscopic spore that'll come land on the wood. And then if there is supporting moisture levels inside there, allows it to germinate. It grows, makes more spores, and continues growing into a large colony. And then it will, depending on the size of the colony, will rapidly break down the wood. Moisture sources. It's hard to say. Moisture sources. There's a number of places that moisture can be intruding into the crawl space. A lot of times it's a grade issue. The ground slopes towards the house from the outside, things like that. Foundation issues where an animal or something has dug underneath, made a tunnel, something like that. Some low spot for the water to accumulate and get inside. A lot of times it's a downspout issue or clogged gutters, things like that. Allows it to spill over and the water splashes down right next to the foundation. Over an amount of time, that will get into the crawl space and saturate the soil, and then the spores have everything they need after that point. Another moisture source common is leaking pipes, whether it be plumbing pipes, water supply pipes. What I see more often than not is clogged AC condensation lines. Either they're clogged or they just didn't get installed whatsoever. So the water from the air conditioner is spilling out into the crawl space and creating a perfect environment. And then the other common moisture source is just naturally occurring water that's in the soil is usually enough to raise the relative humidity inside the crawl space to support fungal life. Treatment of it. So first step, we get underneath there, we figure out, we observe fungus, obviously, and the first step in mitigating it is to control the moisture source. If it's grade on the outside, then that's going to have to be taken care of. French drains, regrading of the soil completely, things like that. If it's leaking pipes, of course, recommend that you call a plumber or have it repaired to repair that. But if it is naturally occurring ground moisture, that can, depending on the level of the moisture, it can be solved with installing a vapor barrier and taking it all the way to the wall, covering the majority of the soil. If the house is setting in a low spot, something like that, and Linda's going to touch on this in a second, if the natural ground moisture is enough, encapsulation with a dehumidifier might be what's necessary. You can see this one's actually encapsulated, but they've got some kind of leak going on. There's pooling water in this crawl space, and it's actually creating a better environment because that water is just setting in there, not being soaked up by any soil. It's evaporating and creating lots of humidity inside that crawl space. So treatment. We use a product called Boracare. It's a natural borate mineral salt. And so they combine this natural borate salt with some glycols that help it soak into the wood. We spray it on at the correct rate, and it penetrates the wood, kills the fungus, not only the surface fungus, but also soaks into the wood and kills the root, protects it from any future fungus growth on there, and kills the fungus that's on there. So it's both curative and preventative. So it stays on the surface and inside the wood for the lifetime of the wood after it's applied. It'll be on there forever and protected. As long as it's not disturbed, washed off, wiped off, it will be protecting the surface of the wood from that point on. So here's some examples of some wood decay funguses that we found in the crawl space. This is an example of a very light case. You can just see that right there. That's a brown fungus is what it's called. This is going into the three types that we commonly find inside the crawl space. Very light case there. White fungus rot is what it's called. This is, even though that fungus is yellow, it's referred to as white fungus rot. It can present as both white and yellow. This is more of a moderate case. We judge the severity of the fungus level depending on the amount that's there, of course. And this has got some brown as well as the white growing on there. It's not necessarily more aggressive than the brown, but it just acts in a different way. It breaks down the wood in a different way, different type of enzyme. This is an extensive case of white fungus rot. It's growing on the road back. This is on a girder beam, so this is something that could be detrimental to a house if that rots enough that it could cave the center of the house in, something like that. That's it. I'll turn it back over to Linda.
Thank you. I don't have nearly